Hello and welcome to Other Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. I'm your host, Paul George. On this month's edition of Other Voices, we're going to talk about America's not-so-secret wars, the use of drone warfare around the world, and in particular in Pakistan. We're also going to talk about the growing global resistance to the use of these American drones in several countries around the world. And joining us to take us through what it means to be living under these drones and what the nature of the protest is, we have three folks who have just recently been on a delegation to Pakistan to meet with other anti-drone activists there, to meet with the families of some of the victims of our U.S. drone warfare. And they are now on tour trying to bring word around about what is the reality of the U.S. drone program and how we most effectively bring an end to it. So joining me, starting at the far end of the table, pleased to welcome Toby Blume from Bay Area CodePink. CodePink were the ones that sponsored this delegation to Pakistan. In the middle is Joe Lombardo. He's the national co-coordinator of the United National Anti-War Coalition, or UNAC. Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
And seated directly to my right is Leah Bolger. She is the president of Veterans for Peace and is also a retired commander from the U.S. Navy. Welcome one and all to Other Voices. Before we get into your trip, I'd like you to take 10, 20 seconds to tell us about each of your groups, because we like to be sure that word gets out about organizing. That's one of the things we do. So, Toby, I think people are really familiar with CodePink, but give us your elevator talk.
Yeah, sure. CodePink was founded just prior to the invasion of Iraq. A bunch of women got together, activists, and were appalled that we were getting ready to march into Iraq, into a war that was totally unjustified. And they did a vigil outside the White House for 6 months before the war started, and we've been growing ever since and been really strong voices in the media against our foreign policies, doing all kinds of activism.
And very strong here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Joe, tell us about UNAC.
Well, UNAC is a fairly recent organization, founded in July of 2010. It's a coalition of groups nationally, and we basically were founded in a conference in Albany, New York. We organize around the anti-war movement, anti-war issues, but we also see that there's a U.S. component of the war. We call it the war at home. A lot of that was associated with civil liberties issues, especially around Muslims, and we have been supporting some of the Muslims who have been attacked in this country. We also have taken very strong stands on the Palestinian and Gaza issue.
Great. And I think people are probably familiar with Veterans for Peace, but give us your...
Sure. Veterans for Peace was formed in 1985 by a Vietnam veteran and his wife, and they wanted to create an organization that would kind of bridge the gap between the veterans community and the peace community. And so Veterans for Peace was born in Maine, and we now have about 150 chapters and about 5,000 members all across the United States.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a great organization.
And you're national president.
I am.
How did you get to be national president? Is it a democratic organization?
It is a democratic organization. I formed a chapter of Veterans for Peace in my hometown of Corvallis, Oregon, and I served as its president for 3 years, and then I ran for the National Board of Directors, and I was elected, and then I served as the vice president for 3 years, and then this last year I became the first female president of Veterans for Peace, and so I'm proud to be that.
Great. Well, let me get each of you again briefly to kind of ease us into this story. Your own motivations for going to Pakistan. It couldn't be an easy thing to go to an area where bombs are raining down frequently. How did you go from a 20-year career in the Navy as a commander to head of Veterans for Peace and to Pakistan?
Well, I get that question a lot, and you know, frankly, Let
me ask a different one.
Not from you, but I do get that question a lot. But you know, for many people in Veterans for Peace, the answer is much more. You know, their experience in the military was much more transformative, and they went in with one idea, and they served in combat, and they saw firsthand the horror of war, and that really changed them, and you know, when they came out of it saying, I don't want to participate in that, I want to work against that. My experience was very different, and not you know, not very heroic, but I joined in 1980 in the middle of the Cold War. Women didn't go into any kind of combat position, and so I joined because I needed a job, which is why many people join the military.
Right.
And I did not have a particularly good education about history of the United States and military imperialism, and so I just, it was a job to me, and I didn't have to think about it too much, and I didn't have to make those real crisis of conscience decisions about whether I could shoot somebody or be shot at, or how would I react in those situations. So it was an interesting job. I had a lot of responsibility, and
Yeah, commander's pretty high ranking in that.
it is. But I didn't have to. I didn't have that same kind of really hard transformation that some people have.
Yeah.
So I retired, and now I'm able to be a full-time peace activist, a volunteer peace activist,
Right.
live on my military pension, which I love the irony of that to tell people. But
You moocher. Joe, I take it you're a longtime activist. How did you get hooked up to go to Pakistan?
Well, my activism started during the Vietnam War when I was in college, and I was up for the draft, but my draft number was too high, and I did not get drafted, but a number of my friends did. I lost friends in Vietnam, and I became active and staff person for one of the two major national coalitions that existed at the time, the National Peace Action Coalition. And I've been a peace activist ever since. I got very active once the Iraq War started, and I've been very active ever since, and helped form UNAC, and was elected as one of its national coordinators. When I heard that Code Pink was going to Pakistan and to organize around the issue of the drones, we had been talking about the drones. The drones are a way that war can be expanded without troops, and so we're now expanding the war into Pakistan, which we're not at war with, and Yemen and other countries such as this. So we thought it was a very important issue, and we were really happy that Code Pink took the initiative to do this. So I signed up for the tour and learned a lot, and I think more and more we need to have the drone issue become more central to the anti-war movement, and this is a good way to learn about it and do it.
All right, and before I go to Toby, I wanted to ask, while Leah was speaking, how many veterans do we have in the audience or on our crew? Few around. Phil on camera 3 here is an active member of Veterans for Peace locally.
terrific.
Yeah. So, Toby, why don't you pick up the story, since Code Pink sponsored this, your own little story, but brief story, but what inspired Code Pink to do this trip, and what you hope to get out of it?
Okay, well, personally, I think I almost came out of the womb being a peace activist. As a teenager, my parents subscribed to the Life magazine, and I remember very vividly those war pictures that were published in Life magazine that really had a strong impact on my feelings about war. Had some really good teachers and a father who taught me a lot about thinking differently than the status quo. But as far as Code Pink goes, there was an inspiration. We had a summit in April this year on the East Coast, an anti-drone summit. Activists from all over the country came together to discuss how we could network together and build a stronger resistance against drone weapons. And out of that came the inspiration to go to Pakistan and bring Americans as citizen diplomats to meet with the people in Pakistan. And for multiple reasons. One big one was to get firsthand stories, get the real truth, because the drone warfare is not transparent. Our government isn't honest about what they're doing. It's also a secret CIA war in Pakistan in particular. And so we wanted to find out from the people there, but we also wanted to travel there and communicate to the people that there are Americans that strongly believe that their lives are as important as ours, and that we wanted to join hands with them in solidarity and stand in strong defiance about our American foreign policy that not only kills a lot of innocent people, and as far as I'm concerned, militants are innocent too, because they're just fighting U.S. imperialism. And but also just the wars themselves destabilize those countries. heard a lot of firsthand stories from people I talked to in Pakistan about how their country, not just in the tribal regions where the drones are dropping, the drone missiles, but also throughout Pakistan, how much they've been harmed by the drone war and the war of terror, as we like to call it, U.S. war of terror.
I do want to get into some of those personal stories because I think it's very important to bring that back, and that's obviously one of the reasons you went. There was also, is there an organized anti-drone resistance in Pakistan? Are there public demonstrations? Joe, or whoever wants to pick up on that.
One of the things we did was we went there to join a march, basically a car caravan from Islamabad to Waziristan, which is federal administrative tribal areas where a lot of the drones have been killing people, that was being organized by Imran Khan. Imran Khan is a leading politician in Pakistan. He's the head of a party called the Justice Party, and he has been very outspoken.
He's kind of touted to be the next leader of Pakistan, or a good
He's
chance
very
of it?
popular. It's a good chance, and it's very interesting because when asked by the media there, what would you do if you are president, about the drones, he says, I will tell the Americans to stop sending drones into our country and killing people. And when asked what if they don't do that, he says, we will shoot them down, which I think is the correct policy. So anyway, he led this big march of the people of Pakistan to Waziristan. The 31 of us American anti-war activists went along, and we were being welcomed by the tribal leaders in South Waziristan. We were going to go into Waziristan and hold a huge rally of people from the tribal areas, Pakistanis and Americans, against the war, which raises the question, if everybody wants peace, why are we having war? It would have been a very powerful thing to do, but we were stopped at the border of Waziristan. But there is opposition. Just about everybody's opposed to the drones. All the parties speak against the drones. There's been demonstrations against the drones, and it's very, very, very unpopular in Pakistan.
So this was a peace march organized by Pakistanis that you 31 Americans went and joined, and I assume this was not the first such march or demonstration against drones.
Well, I think it was sort of an unprecedented move for Imran Khan to go into the Fatah region, because most politicians don't go into these areas. The Pakistanis in general don't go into these areas. They need permission from the government. And so it was kind of a unique thing that not only was Imran Khan saying, yes, I'm against these drones, but I want to go to where the people live who are being harmed by these weapons. And so it was not just symbolic, but it was actually, he was actually, walking the talk, so to speak.
Yeah, especially somebody who presumably can draw the media attention, such as Imran Khan, since he is a very popular politician. Joe said that you got stopped at the Waziristan border. Was that just the U.S. activists, or the entire march was not allowed to enter Waziristan?
Well, the Pakistani government had warned Imran Khan and the planners that they would be prevented from entering the border, and that it wasn't safe. They were given all kind of reasons why they shouldn't go there. And so what the government actually did was set containers across the roadway. So there was no
so you're quite literally blocked from going.
Literally blocked. And there was an effort by the activists to actually try to move the containers. I think they moved them a few yards or so, I'm not sure. But we got almost to the border, stayed at a compound just outside the border of Waziristan. And the delegation in this compound, along with hundreds of Pakistanis that were there, had a rally in the compound. Imran Khan spoke, and Medea Benjamin, one of the founders of CodePink, and we were welcomed with just the most incredible support and appreciation that Americans had traveled to the other side of the earth to support them in the violence that's being committed against their people. And it was quite moving. We all will never forget. It was one of the most meaningful times of the experience there. But you had asked the question about have there been other marches? And actually, I've been following this because Imran Khan has organized massive marches over the last year and a half, tens of thousands of caravans on roadways blocking, in particular, a couple different times, the roadways that carry NATO supplies through trucks into Afghanistan, and had shut down the roads for a day or two.
Wow.
And he has such support from the people that the Pakistani government didn't dare intervene his mobilization of the resistance. So that what I heard when I was in Pakistan is that it's only recently where the true story of drones is getting out in the media more. So just like in this country where it's been kept undercover, the Pakistani population has not been educated well on it. And it's just recently where the media has been covering more stories about the truth about the drone warfare. So it's started to probably move the sentiment of the people in a more correct direction, let's say.
Let's talk a minute about the Pakistani government's position on this, on the drones. My understanding is they officially oppose it, they protest each strike, but obviously there has to be some help coming from the government to carry out these strikes. Can you talk about that?
It's very incongruous because the polls show that this is the main point of conflict between Pakistan and the United States. Their foreign minister, when asked why do 75% of Pakistanis think of the United States as an enemy country, she said, in a word, drones. And so you hear all the politicians say they're against it, yet we know that they are complicit in, if they didn't want this to happen, and they absolutely would put their foot down, then it wouldn't happen. But they are complicit, and that's why I think it was a kind of a revelation to us that the Pakistanis that we met were so grateful to us to come for coming to protest our government, coming from so far away. And I think in a way it kind of embarrassed them that here their own government was complicit in the killing of their fellow citizens, and yet what were they doing? They weren't doing enough to protest,
right.
And so they kind of felt like we motivated them to stand up and speak out. And we didn't see, there's very little investigative journalism. Why aren't journalists, Pakistani journalists, going up into these regions and taking the pictures and interviewing the people? Why does it take, foreigners to come in and do that? So
why is it?
Well,
did you talk to any journalists while you were there?
We did, yes, we did.
And ask them these questions?
Well, yes, but the problem is that they're definitely oppressed by the government that doesn't want them to see and hear the results. For instance, it's very difficult to get the word out. The Waziristan is a very rural region. There's not a lot of electricity. There are no cell phone towers. So if there's an attack, there's no way to get the word out. The only phone communication they have is by landline, which are operated with generators, which are controlled by the army, which is controlled by the government.
Right.
And the government doesn't want the people to know that women and children and non-combatants are being killed. They want to believe that only the bad guys, only the Taliban are being taken out with these weapons. So they want to keep their constituencies quiet and not questioning, just like the United States.
Let's stay on that angle. Who is perishing in these drone attacks? We get so little information in our own mainstream media, which probably
well, you could answer that with the truth, or you could answer it with a lie. We spoke with the ambassador from.
You can guess our preference on this.
We spoke to the ambassador, a man named Richard Hoagland. We actually had 3 contacts with him. He came and spoke to us, and he made the fantastic claim that we don't kill civilians. He said 0 civilians have been killed. We knew names of civilians, people like Tariq Aziz, a 16-year-old boy that came from the tribal areas to Islamabad to be part of a conference on drones, and he was given a camera to go back and document some of this stuff, and the U.S. targeted him and his 12-year-old cousin were killed. So we knew of people, and there had been some studies that were done just recently, and they had numbers that were coming out, and people don't think they're exactly accurate because it's difficult to tell because the U.S. isn't keeping statistics on this. But we met with a number of
or at least isn't giving
statistics. We met with a number of family members of people who were killed, and they brought pictures of these people. And when we went to Waziristan on our buses, we had blown up pictures of some of the children that were killed. We met, for instance, with a journalist from North Waziristan named Noor Bram, who has made it his duty to document these killings. So when there is a drone attack, he goes and he takes pictures. He gets names, he counts the victims, he documents the time, when, where, place, and so forth. And he has a lot of documentary evidence. So, for instance, he told us that there were 760 women that have been killed by these drones. So that's a little bit different than the zero figure. Mm-hmm. But, you know, this is the same government that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so I tend to trust the Pakistanis who are on the ground, who have seen these things and brought back pictures, and they showed us pieces of drones that they would pick up. They used to try to sell them for scrap metal. Now they're collecting them. We were invited over there by a group of lawyers that are helping the victims and have some information, and they were able to get some of the victims down to talk with us. So it's very clear that there are a lot of victims, and not just the people that are killed are victims. They told us 24 hours a day drones fly overhead, and you hear them buzzing. They have a name for it. There's no English translation from the Pashto for the name, but it's something like chicken screech. And they live in fear. They're afraid to go to weddings, they're afraid to go to funerals, they're afraid to congregate on a street corner or in someone's house. The children no longer go to school because they're afraid of being attacked. It has created mental health problems throughout the region. In these tribal areas, they did not have, for instance, instances of suicide in the past. Now children are killing themselves. Teenage children are killing themselves, and they're documenting the evidence of suicide. So it has destroyed the fabric of these communities, and this is what's happening on a regular basis in Waziristan, and it's our government that's doing it.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago I went over to a small forum. Well, it's pretty well packed. The students at Stanford did with the authors of a couple of recent studies, and the Stanford report, and Medea Benjamin was there as well. And this, they were saying, was really the biggest effect is the constant state of fear, and it just has ruined the society that nothing social can go on anymore, whether it's getting together for storytelling or rituals like weddings and things like that.
I'd like to point out, when we met with Ambassador Hoagland, we made a point of talking about the Stanford NYU study that had just been released, and we asked him to read it. And he had not read it, and we went on the march to Waziristan. We came back, we met with him again, and we asked him, have you read it? No, he said no, he hasn't read it. He understood that it was controversial, and he didn't intend to read it. He refuted the pictures that we had. He said that they were made up. He didn't believe the stories that we told him. He actually showed, it denied all this. And then I asked him point blank, I said, will you not agree that the overhead drones there all the time, the knowing that they're there, this is a sort of psychological warfare? Will you not agree with that? And he said, well, it was his understanding that they flew so high that they could neither be seen nor heard. This is just a complete denial.
He has a lot of understandings of various things, doesn't he?
Right.
You were about to chime in on that?
Yeah, a couple things to add. One thing is that we found out the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad absolutely refuses to take any grievances from any Pakistanis that have lost civilians, loved ones in these drone missile attacks. So they're refusing to take any petitions, letters. They have lawyers that are representing them. This is really abominable. And then at the same time, we have the ambassador at the time, who's now being replaced. He was an interim ambassador, saying that no civilians are being killed, or then later he said, well, it's at least no larger than a 2-digit number. And when we question him further, well, 2 digits, what does that mean? Is the low end of 2 digits, or is it 99? And he wouldn't clarify that. But we now have a lot of independent studies, and the most recent one, this Columbia study, Columbia University, actually looked really carefully, and they said even the independent studies that are showing the higher number of civilians being killed are actually an estimated number of and they gave a lot of supportive evidence to support that. So the other thing to say is that, you know, I've been a anti-drone activist for 3 years. And as soon as I found out that my government was using remote-controlled weapons, I got really heavily involved. I've been organizing protests at military bases, at Creech, where they fly the Reapers and the drones, up at Beale, where they control the Global Hawk surveillance drone. And for 3 years I've been active. It's only in the last few months where I found out that the people in these tribal regions are seeing and hearing these drones every day. That, as the Stanford study said, it's terrorizing their communities. We have hit multiple funerals, we've hit multiple wedding parties, we've hit multiple jirgas, which are where the elders meet in council to settle community disputes. And now the elders, I think Joe might have mentioned, they're afraid to meet and talk about community problems. So every level of their society...
That's like a city council can't meet to
well, it's more
resolve...
than a city council. That is the government in the tribal areas. And last March they had a jirga for the whole area there. We targeted it. We killed 49 leaders of their community. How do you continue to have a community when we kill? And the U.S. government and the Pakistani government don't give reparations when they do this, but at that particular time they offered reparations. They offered $6,000 to each of the families for someone who was killed at the jirga. And all of the families refused it. They said, we want money. We don't want money, we want justice. And one other thing about Hoagland said he's very familiar with North Waziristan area. And we said, well, why? And he said, I used to live there. And we said, well, what do you mean you used to live there? And he said, well, you know, when the Russians were in Afghanistan, I was there organizing resistance against the Russians. Now, at that point, the people in Waziristan were called freedom fighters, and now they're called militants. It is just a political change that matters, but it's the same people in the same communities.
I want to get to our audience, because that's always a major part of this program. That's why we call it Other Voices. But I want to hit on the questions of the basic legality of this. We recently had the president stating that no country would stand for missiles raining down on it from outside its borders. So how legal, what is the position? First of all, we have to understand that the military, the Pentagon, is running some of these programs, drone programs, but most of the strikes in Pakistan are being run by the CIA, which is non-military. So what are analysts saying about the legality of the United States doing this?
Well, that was a real source of astonishment for me when we met with Ambassador Hoagland, and I tried to talk to him about the violation of international law, and he said, well, you may believe that we're violating international law. I said, no, it's not a matter of my belief. You know, there are laws of sovereignty, there are boundaries here. We are violating airspace, we are killing civilians who are members of countries that we are not at war with. You know, it violates basic UN charter, it violates Geneva Conventions, it violates the US Constitution. There are many, basic tenets of international law that these drone programs are violating. And, if you just try to imagine it turned around the other way, would the United States allow another country to send in drones and shoot missiles at people that they think might be plotting against them?
I think we all know the answer to that one.
It's absurd, and we would not stand for it. Of course not.
There's one other piece that happens. There's something they all told us about, and that has been pretty well documented now. It's called double tapping. When they target a home or something, people like first responders who come to try to rescue people or to put out a fire or whatever, we target them. And that's a violation of the Geneva Accords. You're not allowed to target the people that are coming to help and give comfort to the people who have been hurt and injured. And we actually asked Hoagland about this, and he says, well, we don't target legitimate first responders. So what's a legitimate first responder? Well, if it's the Red Crescent or something like that. But you have to understand what these communities are.
Right.
These are poor rural communities, and there's not all of the same kinds of first responders.
These aren't ambulances racing down the street and fire trucks.
Right. And you know, if a family gets hit and family members come to try to help, are they not legitimate first responders?
Right.
What right do we have to do that to these people? It's a violation of not just international law, it's a violation of human relations and civil ways of behavior.
Yeah, I suspect when Ambassador Hoagland said that he understood that this didn't violate international law, that what he was probably really saying that he didn't consider international law to be applicable to the United States.
Right. Right, that's right. But he's a career diplomat, and he should know better. You know,
Yeah.
It's abominable.
It sounds like he's a career intelligence guy too, if he was in Waziristan during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. Let's get our audience in on this. Kent is around here somewhere with the microphone, and we've got one up here. And what I would ask our audience members to do, so we can get you on camera, if it's not a burden, to stand up and keep the microphone right in front of your voice so that people at home can hear you. And you're right next to somebody who had his hand up, so let's start there and then come up front here for the next one. But
Is this okay?
yep, very good.
I appreciate your question about the legality, because it was one of the things I was wondering about. And you mentioned, your panelists mentioned earlier in the conversation that there seemed to be a kind of looking the other way by the Pakistani government, that there was a kind of complicity on their part. So my question, wondering if you could say more about the legality of the U.S. doing that, if they appear to actually have the Pakistani government's permission to do this. Can you say more about that? I reconcile those things.
Well, I think I think that they definitely have the understood permission of the Pakistani government. And I don't know if you remember when the Pakistani troops were killed accidentally, and then they blocked off, the Pakistani government blocked off that entry route for supplies. That was a huge political, diplomatic thing that we had to resolve that so we could get our troops through. But I think that the government, there was a lot of pressure on them from the Pakistani people to react and respond to that and say, we won't let it stand. But there is, I think that the Pakistani people are not told the truth. We were, because the government knows that if the people knew the truth, they wouldn't let it stand. So the Pakistani people are told that when there is a drone strike, we were told this exact example, that they get like the news crawl across the bottom of their TV screen that will say, a drone attack in North Waziristan, 8 militants killed. And it doesn't say the gender or the age or the names of these people, doesn't identify them. And the Pakistani people are almost happy. I don't want to generalize too much, but they're almost happy just to believe that, because if they knew the truth that we were killing women and children and old men and whatever, then they would rise up more strongly against their country. But I think that it's now with the new political leadership of Imran Khan, who is really vocal about it and says he would shoot them down. I think there may be definitely a change in the way they respond to these attacks. We did talk to some other politicians who said, yes, they were against the drones, but I think they also are beholden to the United States government for the aid that we send them.
How much is that?
Oh, do you know?
I don't know, but
I think it's about in the range of 1 to 2 billion every year.
I think you're right.
And it goes up and down.
Yeah.
which is
I actually just checked
That's
it.
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yes, and you have to understand that the U.S. has a lot of influence, and this whole war on terror has created a lot of chaos within Pakistan. And I don't believe that any of the parties officially have a position that they do support the U.S. doing the drones. But clear it's that they're not doing the kind of opposition that they need to say, no, you're not going to have drones and we're going to stop you. But one of the things that our delegation did, we were front page news there every day, as well as being news here. And we raised the whole profile of the drone issue within Pakistan and everywhere else. And I think that this has helped to change the atmosphere a little bit that's going on there. And I think it's going to be more difficult for the U.S. to wage this kind of war.
Okay, Kent, right down here in front. And if you would stand up, please.
Thank you. I came back this year after spending 4 years, almost 4 years in Pakistan. I came to the US as a student and then decided after a long time to go back and live there. Now, I have a very different reconstruction of things as I saw them. First off, let's note something. The areas that you're talking about, prior to 1947, they were controlled politically by the Congress Party, which was Gandhi's party. And someone who was very close to Gandhi actually decided to use non-violence as his weapon of resistance against the British. Okay, then politics changed with the creation of Pakistan. Over the last 25 years, what we have been seeing is essentially theocracy creeping in. So I got the distinct impression that you have a mainstream media and you have mainstream political parties. They operate within a certain space. That's a space which protects certain things which are totally sort of contrary to human rights. For example, there's a blasphemy law in force in Pakistan. There have been people killed. Minorities regularly get harassed. I mean, I've just seen that firsthand. Politicians
and you're saying these are government actions?
Oh, sorry?
You're saying these are government actions?
Well, there are two governments. There are two aspects of the government. There's the political government, okay, and then you have the deep state, which is the army. And the army is up to some machinations which, in my view, are independent of the US. I mean, the US comes into the picture, but it's not really an essential part of the picture. Okay, so we have mainstream politicians, among which, of course, we have Imran Khan, who have absolutely refused to condemn incidences of misuse of blasphemy law, targeting of minorities, and so on. Now, they have some pet issues, which are obviously that the US is complicating the game right there. Okay, we have an area which was essentially taken over, the federally administered tribal areas were taken over by the so-called Taliban factions perhaps 7 years ago. This area used to be governed by tribal chieftains, okay, and there used to be political agents which used to interact.
I don't want to have to cut you off, but
Yes, but I'm just giving a perspective.
Yeah,
okay, now those people, the
to
tribal chiefs all got murdered. Okay, the area is under the control of Taliban. Okay, so the government doesn't have a writ there.
Right.
There are drone attacks of a different kind on the population of Pakistan. Okay, I was there when we had a spate of suicide bombings. There were openly negotiated, the Punjab government, of the government of my province, openly negotiated with the Taliban to end the suicide bombing, saying that we have done nothing to harm you, so please stop. So I'm saying that there's an overall picture which is that of a huge country sliding into a very cruel theocracy. The US is a part of it. Okay, if the drone attacks stop, okay, the situation will be still equally horrible. I would like them to stop, and I would like the US to disengage and mind its own business, but I would not be so US-centric in my approach.
Gotcha. A very good comment. I mean, we do tend to do that, but we have to realize there are tremendous political complications within any country, And one of the problems is that when the U.S. meddles in these countries, we don't fully understand that, and we often make situations worse. Did you get any kind of handle on,
Yes.
on what he's talking
Yeah,
about?
well, I'd like to address something that he raised. Before my friend and I, who traveled to Pakistan together, before we even landed in Pakistan, we were traveling from the last stretch of our flight with this gentleman who was returning home to Pakistan, and he shared the stories of the suicide bombings. And he said one of the worst side effects of the drone attacks is that sometimes when these tribal men lose loved ones from the drone strikes, they have so much rage and anger, understandably, and they don't know what to do, so they go down into the big cities. And these are the suicide bombings that he's referring to. So lots of civilians are killed in these suicide bombings, and sometimes they're targeting official buildings, police offices, or whatever. But there's always civilians in the area that get killed. And so when we're counting the deaths of civilians by our drone strikes, we need to consider those civilians that are killed, because that's a direct side effect, a symptom of our violence. So all these drone attacks are spreading violence in so many different directions, and they're counterproductive because they're making more enemies, creating it's considered a recruiting tool for militants to then fight against the United States even more, and there's no end, the back and forth violence. So as Imran Khan said when he was being interviewed by CNN, why can't we just give peace a chance for a change? And as far as I'm concerned, peace is the only way for there to be a solution to problems. But I also want to just lastly say that we have to remember that the American government is setting a precedent around the world that a country can go anywhere they want, use remotely controlled weapons, and just eliminate people in any place that they happen to be. They could be in their cars. Women are killed in their kitchens. Many of the strikes happen at night between 12 and 6 a.m. while they're sleeping, so they're afraid to go to sleep. We've attacked schools. This boy, a 16-year-old boy, was killed with a drone missile because he was going to document civilians killed. This is unprecedented territory that the United States is entering, and it's setting an example to other countries. And if we don't rise up as a citizen, the citizens of the world, that stand for humanity, we're going to have a very violent world out there for our great-grandchildren and all the generations that come after them. So we all have a responsibility to get involved and stop it.
Yeah, I think, first of all, our focus is clearly on the United States because we are from the United States. We were asked many times, because we were on this march with Imran Khan, whether we're supporting his candidacy or supporting his party, and we always said, no, we're against the drones, and we will work with whoever will be against the drones. But I had the opportunity, and some of us had the opportunity, to work with, while we were there, a group of secular parties and individuals in Pakistan. In particular, I worked with a group called the Labour Party of Pakistan, which has now actually merged with a bunch of other secular parties, and people have a lot of hope for that. And they explained that this war on terror has actually raised up the profile of a lot of the Islamicist parties in a lot of ways, because we are seen as attacking Islam and attacking Muslims, and they have been among the strongest and clearest in fighting back. So it has raised up that profile. So it is actually this war on terror that has helped part of what you are saying. And now, also when we spoke with the people in Waziristan, including one person who was a Malik, who was a tribal leader, who had a son and a cousin who was killed, a son and a brother who was killed in the drone strikes. He said the vast majority of people, and the tribal people, are not part of the Taliban. They don't want to be part of the Taliban. They don't care about the Taliban. But they are the primary victims of these drones. And there's tremendous hatred that's built up towards the United States because of this. A recent Pew poll showed 75% of the Pakistanis see the United States as their primary enemy. And this is one of the reasons that this Islamicist stuff has profile has been raised. And we're not going to end any of that until we end the drones and we end the war in Afghanistan and let the people of Pakistan work out their own problems. I don't know enough about the politics in Pakistan. I never could until being there for a couple of weeks. Pakistani people have to decide that. It would be wrong for me to say much about it, just as it is wrong for the U.S. government to try to impose its will in Pakistan, which is what it is doing. It's both it would be a violation of Pakistan's self-determination. We have to get out. We have to stop the killing, and then the people of Pakistan can work out their own problems.
One of the things I've read especially about the use of drones in Yemen is that one of the major effects is that it becomes a major recruitment device for Al-Qaeda in that region. Is that something that's talked about in Pakistan, and is that happening there?
Well, I know that, who was it said that it replaced, who said that the drones have replaced Guantanamo as the #1 recruit?
Yeah, I think Imran Khan said that.
Was it Imran Khan?
I think
I
so.
don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's just really obvious that it's obvious to everyone, and I think it's even obvious to the United States. But we don't really care because we want to keep our war machine going. We have to have enemies so we can keep things
a price
going.
the government's willing to pay.
Yes, right.
Well, it's not even a price. I think that they know that it causes more militants.
Right.
They know it causes more terrorism. But if you're going to have a war against terrorism, you've got to have terrorists.
That's right.
And you have a war against terrorism allows you to bring troops to 120 countries and have 59% of your budget go to the military, and allows them to do the kinds of things they're doing around the world to protect whatever they consider U.S. interests, which they're not my interests.
There's a reason that there's panic in Washington that the defense budget might be cut as part of the fiscal cliff stuff. And that's part of it. Let's try to get back to the audience. Are there some more questions out here or comments? Anything? All right, a couple here. Thank you, Kent.
It's just so ironic. It's so ironic that we, the U.S.
Keep the mic up near your voice, or
The U.S.
your
government,
mouth.
As it turns out, is the biggest terrorist. We make a big deal about our war against terrorism. I think Noam Chomsky, defined it as a calculated use of force or the threat of force to achieve economic, political, religious, whatever goals. So, I mean, it's like the U.S. government is very hypocritical, and it's obscene what is happening here, and it's murder, and we're the last ones to admit it. But anyway, that's blah blah blah.
Well, that was nice blobbing. Thank you.
I wanted to make a point in response to that, is that what Americans need to know, because this is all so undercover. I mean, we've been using these drone weapons for years without even knowing that we're using them. This is shameful. But 2 years ago, the Air Force said that they already were training more drone pilots than pilots that fly manned planes. That was 2 years ago. And they admitted that the direction for warfare was to actually fight war with these drone weapons, remotely controlled weapons. And now 2 years later, here today, I just found out less than a week ago that I thought we had about 3 drone bases in Africa. We now have 6 that at least we know about in Africa, in places like Ethiopia, the Seychelles Islands, Djibouti, Mali. I can't remember all the others, but that's just in Africa alone. Who knows where else we're already building drone bases that we don't know about. We are starting to become, or we have become the world's military in a way that the rest of the world don't want us to be. We're forcing our military bases in countries they're trying to resist very hard. And again, it's for the future of this planet that Americans, especially because it's our country that's leading the way. We have 76 countries that have drone technology. Some of them have armed drones already, besides the United States and Israel, who's used them in Gaza. Great Britain has used them in Libya and Afghanistan and elsewhere. But these other countries, they're going to get armed drones someday too, and we need to really do something fast. It's going to be the further it goes, the harder it's going to be to turn it around.
And I might mention that I just mentioned the Pentagon budget, and the request for next year's budget, I think, includes something like $5 or $10 billion for new drones, additional drones.
And that's not counting the CIA's budget, for, which is separate from the Pentagon budget.
That's true. And is the CIA running more drones than the Pentagon? Do we have any idea?
I don't know if we have any idea, but we do know that the CIA is running the program in Pakistan, but we don't know where all their, So not only is the program secret and unaccountable, but it just, that's another way that it violates international law. Here you have a civilian agency that is assassinating people in an allied country. I mean, and Ambassador Hoagland doesn't understand that violates international law. He doesn't get that.
One of the things, I want to ask your reaction to this, I can kind of guess what it might be, but shortly after the election, it came out that in the course of, during the election campaign season, that suddenly the White House decided that they better start writing some rules for the use of drones.
Ironic.
To leave for the next Republican president if it had turned out that way. What's your reaction to that? That this program has been going on for a long time. All 4 years that Obama has been in office, he's used them far more than George Bush ever did.
Right.
With no rules?
Well, my response to it is drone killing, targeted killing this way is assassination. And assassination is illegal by international law, by national law, and that we would actually make a rule book for assassination is just disgusting. And it's interesting that just because now Obama got reelected, now they're like relaxing. If you heard the story, there's not a deadline now to put this manual out for drone use because we have Obama in for 4 more years. So anyway.
Any comments on the rule book or lack of it?
Well, these are extrajudicial killings.
Yeah.
If you invade a country with troops, you can capture people and put them in prison. Or if you're going to go after someone, they can say, no, it's not me you want, it's that person in the next house that you want. But drones don't give anybody the right or the ability to do that. And Ambassador Hoagland actually used this to try to justify. He says, well, no, we're not violating international law. There is no law with this. I mean, there's laws on other kinds of weaponry and other kinds of issues, but because they haven't put together any laws on this, this was his excuse for why we are not violating laws. But just in terms of generic weapons, the way we are using them are violations of laws. And we now assassinate with them. We've assassinated Americans with them. We are now using them for surveillance in the United States, and Alameda County, right up the waterway here, wants to get, the sheriff's office wants to get them so they can use them. If you can assassinate Americans with drones, maybe they won't be used always for surveillance. Maybe they will be used to kill someone. So we have to stop this. There's a creeping violation of civil liberties with the NDAA, and you can arrest someone without charges and put them in jail indefinitely. These are all creeping violations of human rights and civil liberties that we really have to stop, and drones are right in the center of it.
Yeah, we might mention in the context of domestic drones, which is not really the same issue here, but gets into the civil liberties area, as you just mentioned, Joe. But Congress has already ordered the Federal Aviation Administration to figure out a plan to permit 15,000 drones in continental United States within 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Any more questions here? All right, we're getting very low on time. Back row here, Kent, if you would. And let me introduce, this is Jeff Mackler, also from UNAC, who's organized this tour. And I thank you, Jeff, for bringing these very fine guests to our program.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you to tell us about the disappearance of Afia Siddiqui and what's being done in her case.
You had mentioned that before we went on the air. We've got a few minutes left.
Okay, some of us went to Karachi and met with the family and defense campaign for Afia Siddiqui. Afia Siddiqui is a Pakistani woman who went to college, got a PhD in the United States, had 2 kids here in the United States, went back and in 2003 disappeared. They couldn't find where she was until 2008, when a British journalist found her in Bagram Air Force Base, where she was being tortured and interrogated. People didn't know why, they didn't know what happened to her kids. And eventually she was brought back to the United States. She was tried. They said while she was being interrogated, she grabbed the rifle of one of her interrogators and tried to shoot him. She did not shoot him. She's a 4'11" woman, and it's a very crazy story to say that, but she was shot twice. She was brought back, and she has now been given 86 years for trying to, for this supposed shooting while she was being interrogated, and she's in prison in Texas. And there's a huge campaign. There's millions have come out in the streets throughout Pakistan for her. We saw this, and there's other members, peace delegates that are over there now that are working with her campaign. There's going to be about 20 rallies throughout the country. We have some pictures of it. And more, the anti-war movement has to understand that these attacks on Muslims in this country and this kind of attack are all part of this war on terror, and we have to start fighting on this basis too, and bringing this to light. So there's more I could say, but for the lack of time, that's a quick synopsis.
We are very much out of time. Your website?
UNAC Peace, UNACPEACE.org, UNACpeace.org.
And more information there. About 20 seconds to sum up, and your website.
Veteransforpeace.org, and you do not have to be a veteran to join Veterans for Peace. About 20% of our members are associate members, so non-veterans, and we're happy to have anybody join us who supports our statement of purpose.
And drones has become a major part of
Absolutely, it's a big part of what
agenda.
we're doing now. Absolutely.
Okay, great. And CodePink website and closing thoughts,
we have a
Toby.
droneswatch.org, and that's it, right? Droneswatch.org. It's a CodePink managed website to keep our network growing. And locally, and I'm organizing monthly protests at Beale Air Force Base. You can go to Occupy, BEALE AFB, Beale Air Force Base. It's 1 hour north of Sacramento. And you can join us in our encampments. We spend the night outside the base.
I'm going to have to leave you camped
sure.
outside the base because we're all out of time. You've been watching Other Voices, brought to you monthly by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. We're usually here live on the first Tuesday of every month, but next month, that first Tuesday is New Year's Day. So let me wish you a happy, peaceful, and drone-free New Year, and we'll see you back here in February. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.